and welcome back to the second segment of our show this morning. We have been joined on the set by His Lordship, the Right Reverend Philip Wright. And as we mentioned prior to the commercial break, we will now be discussing an event that has since taken place, the 50th session of the Synod of the Anglican Diocese of Belize. Good morning.
Good morning, Marlene and Isani. It's good to be here once again. And following those rather exciting discourses. Hope I can live up to something.
I was going to tell you, you're following both Hot Topic and Youthful Energy, so there's a lot to keep up with.
Yes, very much so.
But this is equally important as well. And we're talking about one of the events that is used as almost strategizing for the church itself. And I've always found it very interesting, the level of involvement that you have at your synod. So let's just talk about this year's event and the participation level you found and some of the major points that you were discussing.
Excellent. Well, first of all, when it comes to synod, we often describe synod as our most important governing body. Yeah. It is the gathering of the church that can make policies, can amend the constitution, can set in motion a development plan. It has that power to really determine how the church will move forward. And so really what we have then is a gathering of individuals from all over the country. Just about every parish or congregation has at least one delegate. So it's really the mind of the church coming together to discuss some of the past, review, and to chart the way forward. Now this year we decided to do it a little differently. We used to meet in little groups and they do their discussion, they make their presentation, we come up with a composite report. This year we didn't meet in groups. What we did was we stayed in plenary and we had certain guest speakers come in and talk to us. And we tried to focus, it's a limited time so we couldn't cover all issues, but we decided we will focus on 3 areas that we think are somewhat relevant and current. One is the environment, because we continue to obviously have issues there. And I wanted someone to come in and talk to the church about the issues at hand and how the church could be a valuable partner in not only getting the message out, but practicing some of the things So we had Janelle come and talk to us. We even used the biodegradable containers as a demonstration of good first step. We also had someone from the police department, Chester Williams, come in and talk to us about crime from their perspective. Again, with the mind of saying to the church, you know, this is how you can help us fight crime. And so that was an interesting one as well. And then thirdly, we had Ambassador Rosado come and talk to us about precisely the issue that was just discussed. And so Synod had an opportunity this year to really listen to persons in the field, as it were, talk to us about this is the reality, this is what is before us, and this is how you as a church can perhaps help us to get the message out and to help us move these things forward.
I take particular interest in the area of the church and the issue of crime and violence, because by and large, Belizeans believe that the church has been fairly silent on this matter, and it's an issue that affects everyone across the board. In terms of that discussion that you had with the Deputy Commissioner of Police, what was that like in terms of either perhaps an agreement to work with each other or perhaps a point where you are now prepared to go into your respective communities and address these issues with the membership of the church?
Well, precisely. I think the discourse ended up with some form of commitment that we have to work together. Now, we still have to work out the nitty-gritty of that partnership. I think this Sunday, for instance, some officers from the south side there will be going to the St. John's Cathedral. It's just a corporate worship. But then we will also provide space within that worship for them to speak to the congregation. hopefully from our end we will extend an invitation to not only members but the community. Come and worship with us, but at the same time hear something that might be useful.
Yeah.
And that is just a start. We obviously have to work through many other strategies in order to have an impact. But I was listening to you this morning in some of your opening remarks when you talk about this weekend alone, where on the one hand you had the police doing a fantastic work with some young people, and then before long there was a exchange of gunfire or something. And I think it's iconic almost of the challenge we have. Sometimes when I look at our work, even in the schools, where we have access to the young people, and we try. I mean, sometimes I think the criticism level at the church is really unfair, because it's not that we are not trying, but the truth is, to every 1 hour we have with these young people, someone else has 4 to 6 hours with them, and that message, the second message, may not correspond with the one. So we're really up against some serious challenges.
You know, as I mentioned earlier, I think the Synod really gives an opportunity for them to be, for a connection to be built or perhaps reinforced.
Right.
And you spoke of 3 major national priority areas for us. You have clearly acknowledged that there has been criticism of the churches of a lack of involvement or not doing enough, maybe just not on a visible level.
Right.
What do you say, what do you see as the role of the church in this evolving society? Because if I am to say what I see, it's partially taking the same message to a group of persons who no longer have an interest. So where we may have done Bible study because our parents forced us to, you have young people now who will only go to school and stay within a community that the church may very well be active. So is there a move by specifically the Anglican Church to look at the messaging and the methodology of how it's being delivered, whether it's Guatemala, whether it's HIV, whether it's crime, or any other social issue?
It's a very good question, actually, and my mind goes back to just yesterday when we had the graduation service for ACC students, and every time I look at them every year, you know, it's a mix of joy, because this is an important moment for them, and I will say a bit of sadness sometimes, because you look at them, you look into their eyes, and you realize they're really now going into further into this real world that will challenge them on so many fronts. And you ask yourself, did we do enough? You know, did we spend enough time helping them to navigate through this world that is not changing? It's not going to get necessarily any better per se. You know? And so my message yesterday, just to try and answer your question, is yes, we were in a setting of worship, so I deliberately sort of went more religious in my talk. I figured on their graduation night somebody else will come in and tell them all the secular truths that they need to know. But I challenged them, for instance, to develop the ability, if you will, to listen, and this is how I put it, to listen with the ear and the heart of God. And I know sometimes that can, you know, sound cliché, but what I was trying to say is, and I think this is part of the answer, we have to, as a church, continue to encourage people to look at the world around them, to look at themselves, in a sense, through the eyes of faith. Now, for me, my sense of purpose will come from knowing that I serve a God with purpose, you know, that He created the world. He must have an idea of what He would want to see and how His creation is. And we have the great privilege of participating with Him in making this creation a better place. Now, having said all of that, I am convinced that young people, because when I look in their eyes, like all of us, they are filled with hope. They want to know that tomorrow can be a better day and that there's a future for them. And so I think the role of the church more and more is to continue to plant that seed of hope and enthusiasm, brighter future, to not only talk about it, but to create the space where people can see how it becomes real, they can experience it. I still believe that is where the church fits in, you know. And to me, that is not just idle talk. It's not just cliche.
Yeah.
It's really what I believe.
Yeah. And beyond providing a message of hope, which I think is absolutely necessary, and it's really, I think, a part of the primary reason why people are drawn to their faith, because when everything else seems hopeless, you may be able to find hope in your faith. But having had the Synod and having members of the diocese from across the country there, what seems to be the consensus or the potential ways of going the extra step to work with the different communities where these faith-based organizations are stationed?
I think for us as Anglicans, we acknowledge we are not sufficiently out there in the community under the umbrella of what we like to call outreach. We would be the first to admit that there's so much more we can do. By aligning ourselves with some of the other NGOs and other national groups. There's no doubt we need to do that, and that came out of the Synod for sure. A strong message about, as one person put it, improving our footprint in the wider society. And the church has access. It has access via the schools. It has access via the different boards that we sit on. For instance, right now, last week I represented the Council of Churches on the National Celebrations Committee. So there again is where you invite the church in a context that many would consider more secular than religious.
Yeah.
But yet I felt the need at times to speak up and say, well, since we're about national celebrations, let's truly make it national, you know. Let's see if we can put aside the party politics and all the other things that divide us. So when the church has the opportunity, it still is given the opportunity to be a part of the conversation, to be at table. And I think wherever we are, in those kind of settings, we need to voice. We need to voice for justice. We need to voice for equality and so. So we recognize we need to not avoid those situations. Listen,
You can't be ostrich-like. You can't pretend the world around you is not happening.
Precisely.
The Bible is great, but you can't live there.
Exactly. But the one we are following got his hands dirtied, and he did not live in the temple, I can tell you that. Matter of fact, his few trips to the temple were not necessarily pleasant experiences. He was either chasing people out or telling them this is going to come down one day. So, yeah, we have to be in the community. We have to avail ourselves. I'll be honest with you, I'm not a fan of being on television, you know, but I see this as necessary. You know, it provides not just me, but the church to be at the table, to say something and to let people know we want to be involved.
Listening to you, there's a sort of prevailing thought in my mind, and perhaps it comes from the Bible somewhere. It says, to whom much is given, much is expected. Right? So that while the society still considers the church as one of its many pillars, there is the expectation that the church can also reach out to society in terms of dealing with some of the ills that we're presently facing. And I think in terms of the outreach aspect of it, while yes, you mentioned that there is more that can be done, I think that the presence of the church alone in our community, in a sense, keeps things together. But there's a long way to go. It's more than just keeping that fabric together. It's a matter of strengthening it in times like these where everything seems to be taken away from faith. No, it's true. For instance, we met in our synod under the theme, a worldwide team really that is with us, intentional discipleship.
And what I like with that team is the emphasis on intentional, because we all know we're about making disciples. The point is, are we always intentional about it? That even in this conversation, I may be able to see the potential to draw both of you, if you will, to at least consider a deeper relationship with God, not in an offensive way, not in a judgmental way, but just through the conversation, you know.
Yeah.
Someone might leave saying, yeah, you know what, maybe I need to look at certain things differently, maybe a little bit through the eyes of God or through the eyes of faith, and see what that does for me. And so, yes, you're right. It's not just expecting the community to come, it's not just going out to the community, but it is really having the kinds of discourse that leads to good actions and so forth.
You know, and to be fair, and I don't want you to feel that you're here in defense of the church, because while I think everybody has a responsibility in participating in some sort of outreach or assistance to the wider community, one of the challenges I would imagine is being able to inspire those who do come to the church. Because there's a funny thing about Belize. We all have our Sunday Christians, and they're proud of it, and very judgmental of non-Sunday Christians, by the way. But it seems to be that once I have fulfilled my hourly, 2-hourly commitment to that institution, I tick that box off and I am a devout person. But there's more in terms of your teaching. And you know, the Anglican Church specifically, it has some very influential persons within their churches. And it is an opportunity to really build that connection between who you identify with as a Christian and the person you are outside of the building itself. What you do, what you say, what decisions you make, and where you contribute. How about seeing, what do you say about the role as a leader of the church in being able to build that very important connection?
No, again, a very good point, because, and again, a point where I want to say more can be done.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say it, Minister Faber, I think he doesn't hide the fact that he is an Anglican.
Yeah.
And
He used to teach at ACC.
And he used to teach at ACC. But he was at our synod. I mean, not as the Minister of Education, but as a member of the church. And I provided him with an opportunity, for instance, to say a few things to synod as a guest. And some of the things he said in that forum were a bit hard-hitting too, you know, saying to the church, you know, you too need to do more. And we're all in it together, sort of thing. So yes, the extent to which I as an individual may have access to a Minister Faber or the Prime Minister or even the leader of the opposition, all people who from time to time I have conversation with, the leader of the opposition, his wife is principal of our primary school in Orange Walk. A few times I've been up there. He and the wife are in church. So yes, we have that. I have that. The church has that. The question still remains, though, to what extent do we make use of that? And I would say, I would be the first again to say to you, I don't think we're doing enough. But we are doing some things, and we do have some access as well.
So looking at I see there's some cake cutting happening here.
Yeah, good things happen at Synod. You know?
There's cake. But no, I mean, I don't want to lose the opportunity. It was the 50th session, which is an accomplishment in itself, and perhaps a great time to reassess. You know, when you hit these anniversaries, whether it's 1 or 50, you start to think, what can I do more? What have I done well? What can I do better? Yeah. What do you find to be the resolutions coming out of the Synod?
Well, a few of them. One of them, interestingly, had to do with the care of the clergy. You know, it is something that we recognize, again, room for improvement. Here we are, we make tremendous demands of these individuals, day in, day out. Sometimes they have to perform with very limited resources. When you're trying to serve an entire country, it means that you're moving from point A to point B. That is not always convenient. So the care of the clergy was definitely one of the big things that came out. Again, we obviously were mindful of the three areas that we had to focus: the environment, what more can we do, how can we partner more, and so on. Crime and violence, same thing. But there is a fourth thing, for instance, that I raised with the Synod and with the Church. And of course, you know, people say, well, I don't know why Bishop talking like that. But I started to talk about succession plan. With the mind that I am not going to be here forever. I could be gone tomorrow, God forbid.
Yeah.
How prepared is this church, this diocese, to embark on a smooth transition so that when the new leader comes in, you're not reinventing the wheel and spending years developing the same plan, but just because there's a different person. So a big thing that has come out of Synod is the need for the church to embark on a serious succession plan. And I am kind of dubbing it from recruitment to retirement. And so we have to look carefully at who we are recruiting into leadership, not just in the priesthood or the ministry, but across the spectrum, principals, but also how do we care for people as they come towards the end.
Yeah.
We don't just drop them and say, okay,
Thank you for your service.
thank you for your service. So a church that is serious about transition and succession, I think, looks at recruitment to retirement. So I think if there's a big thing that has come out, from my perspective, is that mind to now look carefully at how well we are preparing ourselves and equipping ourselves for the future.
Does this, you mentioned this off record earlier, and I want to bring it up just to see where we are in terms of this particular transition. Does this come from the idea that there is a huge event coming up towards the end of the year where another post, if I may, will be filled for the Archbishop?
Yes.
That you're looking at a succession plan in the context of something like that where someone has chosen to move on?
Yeah, I have to be careful answering that, lest it sounds like I'm putting myself up as a candidate. But no, whatever is happening locally, it's happening regionally, it's happening globally. We all have to decide where we jump in, but the point is we have a role to play in all of these things. Regionally, as you're talking about, yes, I think come November of this year, we will be assembling in Trinidad and Tobago, and there we will elect a new Archbishop. But before we're able to do that, the Diocese of Barbados, because the gentleman that was with me the last time I was here, the Archbishop, was both Archbishop of the West Indies and Bishop of Barbados. And when he retired from both. So effectively creating two vacancies. But the bishop, the office of Bishop of Barbados has to be settled first
before you get the
before we
regional.
can do the regional. And so they have tried twice to elect their new bishop, and they failed. And so they have one more go at it this month, in about less than a week. And should they fail, then they may then come to the House of Bishops for us to appoint somebody. No, nobody likes that, because then you may get someone you may or may not want. But we will settle that first, and then by November. So yes, I think in my mind, you're right, Isani, when I tell my own diocese about how important a succession plan is to, I'm thinking that even regionally, we need to be sure that we're also raising up leaders so that when vacancies like these occur, we can fill them.
They can tap into the Belizean resources.
As well,
All right. And what would you say to those who didn't get a chance to participate in the Synod? I know it is particularly the leaders, about what the Anglican diocese sees in the future? You've made it to your 50th session of Synod. You have a very established presence in the country. For those who are watching and saying, there's my bishop, what's your message to them about moving forward in today's reality?
Well, the thing, again, I'm going to tap in on this intentional discipleship thing, which is really a call for every single member of the church to look at their own discipleship of Jesus, because that's who we are, and to ask ourselves the honest question, how good a disciple am I? How well do I represent the Lord I will entrust my final faith in? How well do I serve him as I go about my daily business? When I go to the office, when I go to the workplace, when I go to the classroom. And for all of us to find a way to support each other in our efforts to be the best disciple we can be.
Yeah.
And so my message to my own members, but maybe across the Christian community, is for all of us to take stock of our discipleship of Jesus and say, how well am I following this man? But of course, to do that, I may have to ask another question. How well do I know him, and what he was about? And so in our church as well, we are also taking some efforts to sort of revisit our own understanding of Jesus and what was he really about? What was he trying to achieve? And what I'm discovering is this guy was far more than just hell and heaven. I think we have too often limited his message to just avoid hell and get into heaven. But when you look at Jesus, as much as have been a big part of his message, he also talked a lot about kingdom on earth, that he was looking to see develop on earth a society, a community that began to reflect, if you will, what heaven must be like. So there is a kind of heaven on earth side to Jesus. And I will continue to challenge the church, continue to challenge my members that is what we're about. But we must do it with every little thing we do, wherever
not just the big gestures.
Not just the big things, just in the conversations we have with each other sometimes. Does that bring some kind of honor to my discipleship or not? And so on and so on. So, yeah, to those who weren't at Synod, the message comes back, let's try and be the best disciples we can, because I really think that's how we can change the society and make things better.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us and enlightening us about the work that has been ongoing and what is to come as well.
And don't be afraid, by the way, may I say, to drop some of the hard questions. I think sometimes you softball the Reverend when he's in the house. But we do want to be engaged in some of the not just the hot topics, but the ones. Because if I may say quickly as well, a role for the church as well is to be a part of educating our people, to be a part of shedding light on things and helping our people to think through things as well. I think that is so important to the faith.
We will welcome you back on some of the harder topipics, trust me.
And
we love getting the church's perspective as well.
Yes, and I said, as I might have said it before, right? That you need to invite me when you have the food, when the cooking, is going on.
We've agreed that we'll have you come in and bless Chef Quilin because he needs
a bit of Friday. That's usually
on Fridays.
We'll fit you in.
Right. You used to do an exercise thing too. When is that?
We can make sure we schedule you on those
invite
days.
Me on days.
We'll have you do some live yoga. All right, we're going to go ahead and take our final break, and when we come back, we'll have our wrap up. So stay tuned.